morning, everyone. Beautiful spring day. We'll be standing out here waiting for our stakeout. This is an important week as the efforts on the Republicans' part to get a clean bill funding our troops continues. We are glad to welcome General Petraeus to Washington this week so that we can get a first-hand report from the field. I'm sorry that he had to work so hard to have an audience of members, but we're glad that the speakers finally found a way to arrange an audience for members to hear exactly what's going on in Iraq and how our efforts with both political reconciliation and military forces are going. This morning, John Murtha said that micromanaging the war is his job. We strongly disagree. It is never appropriate for politicians in the gilded committee rooms of Washington to be dictating targets and tactics on the ground. And so we look forward again this week to welcoming the man whose job it is to effectively run this war on the ground and with the resources that he needs, that it is our job to provide him with. So with more on that, I'd like to welcome our leader, John Boehner.
Well, Adam, thanks. And winning in Iraq is important for the national security of our country. There's no question that Al-Qaeda has made Iraq the central front in our war with them. And winning there will cripple them, make it more difficult for them to recruit people from around the world to their cause. And likewise, if we were to do as the Democrats propose, just surrender, just give up and bring our troops home, we will encourage Al-Qaeda, provide safe haven for them, and allow them to recruit more people from all around the world. This week we expect to have the bill on the floor to fund our efforts in Afghanistan and in Iraq. I think this bill should not have the fingerprints of 535 members of Congress trying to micromanage what's happening on the ground in Iraq. And secondly, we shouldn't expect this funding bill for Iraq and Afghanistan to carry $20 to $25 billion worth of excess spending over and above what the president called for. And I think the president's made clear he will veto this bill if we try to handcuff our generals and our troops on the ground, and if it includes all of this extraneous spending. I expect Republicans will be unified in our opposition to what the Democrats are proposing this week.
I think in response to the leader's last comments, I believe our members are as unified on this issue as they've been on anything in a long time, particularly on who should command the troops in the field. They understand that is not the Congress of the United States. We don't need 535 commanders-in-chief. It's not our job, or even Jack Murtha's job, to micromanage the war, and our members understand that. I think also we need to look today really carefully at the other spending. The spending number is still a huge number. Our friends on the other side are trying to get a lot of credit for taking the things out that people thought around the country were the most laughable. $25 million of relief for spinach farmers, peanut storage, things that have nothing to do with the war effort, but the things that are left in there have nothing to do with the war effort either. Last week on the floor, Mr. Corey was saying, well, it took a long time to get the supplemental last year as well. There were two differences last year. One was that we weren't spending down the money as quick. Secretary Gates said we didn't need the money as quickly last year as we do this year. And maybe the bigger difference, we were trying to get a signable bill that eliminated the additional excess spending that maybe if it should be done, it should be done through the regular process, not as part of some wartime supplemental, some wartime emergency. That's going to be our position again this week and next week and the week after that until we get this issue resolved. Tom Cole.
This is an enormously important vote, obviously in a policy sense, but quite frankly, it's got a real political dimension to it as well. We had a lot of Democrats last year that ran saying that whether they agreed or disagreed with the war, they would never cut funding for troops in harm's way. And yet that's what they're preparing to do. But we even had a number of Republicans who were not happy about the surge and expressed that in a non-binding resolution. Almost all of them then voted in favor of maintaining funding for the troops. avoiding micromanagement from the floor of Congress, avoiding second-guessing military commanders in the field, and certainly never risking the flow of resources that people in harm's way need. I think the American people expect and appreciate a legitimate debate over a war. I think they think it is inexcusable that during that debate there would ever be a question about supplying men and women in harm's way and doing it quickly and easily. You know, again, those people that don't want to support the war effort have every right to argue against us being there. But once we're there, the importance of providing men and women is something that every American understands. We certainly intend to play back, if you will, the commitments that Democrats made on the campaign trail about what they were going to do when it came to troop funding, because we think this bill is very, very different. And it's going to be particularly tough, I think, for conservative Democrats in areas that are very supportive historically of these kinds of efforts and of the American military in general to be able to withstand the public pressure. So I think the sheen is off the new Democratic majority, if you will, and now we're down to where the rubber meets the road politically. It's a very dangerous, very serious vote. It's politically very dangerous vote as well. I always tell our members, just frankly, vote for what you believe and then argue it out of sincerity and conviction, but don't get pulled into a position that you can't defend and that frankly is at odds with what you ran on only a matter of months ago. I think that's where many Democratic incumbents, particularly Democratic freshmen, are running an enormous risk. And frankly, we intend to make sure that people in their districts have every clear understanding of the consequences of their votes.
Questions?
Some
Yes.
Democrats have talked about after the presidential veto, trying to put together a second bill that would put in benchmarks and say USAID is conditioned upon the rest government meeting these benchmarks. What do you all think about that idea?
Well, our leaders actually put forward a benchmark bill in the past. We've always said, Americans are fundamentally scorekeepers, and we want the right way to understand progress. But arbitrary deadlines that say we're coming out whether we're hitting all of our benchmarks or not is reckless, and it is unprecedented in terms of communicating our intentions to the enemy.
Last week at the White House, when the leaders from both sides of the Capitol, both parties were there with the president, this issue was brought up by Nancy Pelosi. And the president said that he'd be happy to work with them on benchmarks to measure success. And so I think there could be some common ground there if they're willing to find it. Republicans have reached out and said we're willing to work to find a way to have benchmarks that help us measure the progress we're making, but not benchmarks to try to ensure failure.
Mr. Leader, one of your Ohio colleagues is calling for the Vice President's impeachment today. What's your thinking about that?
Well, there's two things that happen in Washington, D.C. Public policy and politics. And for some Democrat to call for the Vice President to be impeached, I think is nothing but pure politics. We've got serious work to do on behalf of the American people, and we ought to get about it.
Anything else?